Today, I want to talk about the fact that I feel like fat people are in pain. And I'm not going to say some or most, I'm just going to say fat people, because if you weren't in pain, if you were happy with your life, you would be at healthy weight. And it shows a lot, even in American society, that a good chunk of us are overweight or obese. And yes, part of it is because we don't eat the food that we're meant to eat as humans. That's part of it. Another part of it too is we don't learn the coping mechanisms and healthy ways to deal with our emotions and our trauma, and that manifests into fat. Of course, people who are not fat, they still can have pain too. They just don't use food as their mechanism, as their coping mechanism, and that's why they're not fat. But doesn't mean they're not in pain. So I just feel like you need to be careful when you're making fun of people, because they're probably already in deep pain already as it is. And it just makes me sad. And then this morning when I was meditating, God was telling me I needed to talk about this, that we're in society, we are in a lot of pain, and we manifest that in different ways. And I know, being obese is it's an epidemic, it's a pandemic, not epidemic, whatever kind of demic. And it's because a lot of us are in pain or don't know how to feed ourselves. But honestly, I don't really feel like that's always the case, because we have so much information and technology now. Even if you pick like diets that I personally wouldn't pick, they probably would make you be a healthy weight. You know what I mean? But it's not the food, it's you. You're not able to cope with it. You're not able to cope with your emotions. You're not able to deal with your trauma. And I know in a lot of cultures here in the US, I know in the Black community, it's like sweep it underneath the rug. Let it stay and dogs lie, or something like that. Like, you know what I'm talking about. Let it live or lie and dogs lie, or whatever it's called. Like, just let it go, let it be. But when you do that, it bites you right back in the butt, because then you might be that 50, 60 something year old person dealing with something that happened to you when you were 11, because you were told to sweep it under the rug and not deal with it and ignore it. But it will come after you. So even if it doesn't come after you as fat, it may come after you as an addiction of some sort. And there's so many addictions out there. It may come into some type of form of self-harm. Even if it's not self-harm with excess food, it might be excess of something else: alcohol, drugs, sex, games, gambling, I don't know, all kinds of different weird addictions. Some of them are weird, some of them are not. But it's just really sad. We're in a lot of pain as a society, as a culture, and we are told to use addictions to cope with it, or sweep it under the rug, don't express your emotions. And I know for me growing up, if I wasn't either laughing or smiling, I wasn't supposed to express any other type of emotions. So being an adult, it's like you have to learn now, okay, I can express anger, I can express sadness, I can express, all other emotions. But it's like, ooh, this emotion's very uncomfortable, I don't know how to deal with it. Well, I can eat. I can eat to like suppress it or something, or do some type of self-harm of some sort to suppress those emotions, because I'm not able to express them or process them correctly. And so we as a society need to learn how to deal with our emotions in a healthy way, and to say, yes, this has hurt me, yes, this trauma has affected me, and now what can I do to forgive them for the sake of myself? And that is what we need to do. And it's difficult. I'm in the process of healing from trauma that has been in my body for at least 20 years. And I don't want to be in my 50s and 60s and having to do this. The sooner the better. Now, if you are in your 50s and 60s, obviously it's not too late. It's not too late until you're dead, right? Or maybe the next life you have to deal with the same thing, and then you still have to find a way to deal with it. So I don't feel like there's really no escape from it other than confronting it and healing from it. And then I think those addictions don't seem as addictive anymore, or they don't feel like you need to use them. I remember listening to this TED talk from this man. I think he was like a European man. I think he had an accent. I think he was a European man, but it resonated with me. This was a few years ago. He talked about how people that say you break your leg in an accident, there's two different people, person A and person B. And person A, their life was fulfilling before they broke their leg. They're able to take the pain medication, and then once their leg fully healed after the few months, they no longer took the pain medication and no longer felt the need to take it. And then they had person B, where their life wasn't really that great, and they had a lot of struggles, and they didn't know how to, deal with things, and their life wasn't that great. So when they broke their leg, they took the pain medicine, but now they became addicted to opioids and became addicted. Now they had this addiction. What's the difference, right? I just kind of told you what the difference was. So that says a lot. This man argued that addictions aren't necessarily like a genetic thing. They're more about your environment and how your life is when things happen. And that spoke to me a lot. And that made a lot of sense to me, because I think of my own people in my life, like my father. My father would be someone, quote unquote, has an addictive personality. Because we have that in society where they have addictive personalities and non-addictive personalities. My mom is more someone who has a quote unquote non-addictive personality. She's someone who could eat a few chips and be done. My dad would be someone who would eat the whole bag and maybe go out later that day and get another bag and eat that bag. And I'm like, that's interesting. I don't really think it's a genetic thing. I think I agree with this man. My dad had a lot of abandonment issues and a lot of trauma in his life. And as a black man, for him, I can't speak for a black man, obviously, but for him and in the black community, men don't have the best ways to cope with things. Society doesn't really teach them to cope with things. So it's even harder for them. And so for my father, he didn't really have an addictive personality. It wasn't that. It's that he wasn't able to deal with his own trauma. He wasn't able to deal with not knowing his biological parents. And that's a lot. And other things that happened to him as a child. My mother, on the other hand, maybe she did have traumas in her life. She has trauma in her life. But maybe she found other ways to cope with it where she didn't have to be addicted to certain things. Maybe she was in very deep denial, which I kind of feel like that might be part of it. But again, maybe my mother was in deep denial, or she found mechanisms to just bury it so deep inside her soul and just never let it out. And not everyone could do that. And so I don't think it's between addictive and non-addictive. I think it's how you cope with life and things that you weren't able to deal with. It may manifest in other ways. And I think that's what happened with my father. And my mom, she found ways to cope with it, I feel like, by just burying it and never letting it out, and completely just, almost like it didn't exist at all. And it didn't manifest in other ways, but maybe it does manifest and I just haven't seen it. I'm not my mom. So I know this has gotten really personal, but yeah, my dad had passed away due to addiction. And so if he was able to heal from his trauma and able to know that certain things as a child wasn't his fault, and being abandoned wasn't his fault, and all these different things, maybe he wouldn't have been addicted to anything. And so I just want to say that a lot of us are in pain, but find a way to cope with it in a healthy way. Find a way to confront it. If that means finding a therapist, finding a mentor, finding a coach. I do also believe you're not supposed to use your friends as therapists, but that's a whole nother discussion. There's professionals, medical professionals for that. But really find help and find ways to figure this out and to cope with your life in a healthy way, because it will manifest in a way you're not going to like. Unfortunately for my dad, that wound up just being an early death. For my mom, it's just her being very emotionally disconnected from things. And for me, obesity and different, mental health diagnoses. So it manifests different for everybody. All right. I think that's all I want to say about it. That we're in pain in this society, and it's a sad thing. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.